They fined me $500 for fishing in my own backyard. So I bought their entire 12-acre lake for the price of a mid-sized sedan and banned the Homeowners Association from ever setting foot on the grass again. You see, this woman, this absolute titan of suburban tyranny, thought she could bully a retired Navy logistics officer with bogus fines and imaginary bylaws. Big mistake, huge, because while she was busy power tripping on a mixture of Chardonnay and authority, I discovered something beautiful, something she missed in her blind ambition. The HOA never actually owned the lake. My name is Elias Thorne, 52 years old, retired Navy, and 3 years ago, I moved to Oak Creek Sanctuary thinking I had finally found the perfect place to decompress after my wife, Elena, passed away from cancer. The neighborhood looked like a postcard, 47 homes wrapped around Mirror Lake, a shimmering expanse of water that the original covenants promised was for unrestricted recreational access for all residents. I paid my $200 in monthly dues without complaint, settled into a rhythm that kept the darkness at bay, 5 a.m. coffee, a tackle box that still smelled like Elena's perfume and old leather, and the sunrise fishing that kept me sane for 6 months. It was paradise, until Cynthia Vance rolled into town. Cynthia was a real estate shark, 42, drove a pristine white Range Rover that looked like it had never seen a speck of dust, and wore stilettos to check her mailbox. At first, she seemed normal enough, brought over some store-bought cookies, made small talk about property values, even admired my rod and reel setup, but the day after she managed to get herself elected HOA president, the atmosphere shifted, the air got colder. Suddenly, I'm getting visits about aquatic usage protocols. Suddenly there's a $75 annual permit fee for security and maintenance. And when I politely mentioned that lake access was already covered in our dues, Cynthia's smile didn't just fade. It shattered, replaced by a look of ice-cold calculation. Rules are rules, Elias. Pay up or stay off the water. Here's what 24 years in the Navy teaches you about human nature. Bullies escalate when you comply, so I didn't pay. I kept fishing, same time, same spot. The gentle sound of water lapping against the dock acting as my therapy, the only thing that made sense in a world without my wife. 3 weeks later, the fine arrived, $500 printed on cheap copy paper, citing unauthorized use of common area amenities. And I'm staring at this piece of paper thinking, who does this? Who finds a widower for sitting in silence? Cynthia knocked on my door the next morning, clipboard in hand, her heels clicking on my porch like a countdown timer, telling me this was my formal notice to cease and desist. And when I told her I'd dealt with worse threats in active war zones, her face cycled through a spectrum of rage before she spun around and marched back to her car. But as she drove off, I caught her eyes in the rearview mirror. It wasn't just annoyance. It was pure, unadulterated malice, the look of someone who had just decided to destroy you for sport. That night, I dug out the original covenant documents I'd saved in a fireproof box. Page 12, Section 4, clear as day. Lake designated as unrestricted recreational amenity for all residents in perpetuity. No fees, no exceptions, and certainly no Cynthia Vance. But the next morning, the war officially began. I woke up to find bright orange construction cones blocking the path to the water, a shiny new sign reading, restricted access, permits required. And it wasn't just me she was hurting. Mrs. Higgins, 78 years old, was standing at her kitchen window looking heartbroken because she couldn't feed the ducks. The Miller kids were asking why they couldn't swim, and Mr. Gupta was wondering why his evening walks were suddenly criminal acts. Standing on my deck, looking at those ridiculous cones, I felt a shift in my gut, the same cold, calculating feeling I used to get when supply lines were cut and the mission looked impossible, the mindset that turns problems into puzzles. Cynthia thought she was dealing with a sad old fisherman she could push around. She had no idea she had just declared war on a man who spent decades solving impossible logistical nightmares under fire. She called an emergency board meeting 3 days later, treating it like a national security crisis, and when I showed up, it was just her, a terrified guy named Bob, and a board woman named Janet. 3 people out of 7, which isn't a quorum in the real world, but in HOA fantasy land. It was enough to rewrite the Constitution. Cynthia pushed through a motion restricting fishing to weekends only, 10 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon, with a $25 daily fee, plus retroactive enforcement, meaning she claimed I owed $1,200. The room went dead silent. Bob looked like he wanted to crawl under the table, but Cynthia's hand shot up. Bob reluctantly followed, and the motion carried. That night, fueled by rage and insomnia, I started researching, digging through county records until I found the original 1987 covenant. And there it was, the silver bullet. No additional fees or usage limitations may be imposed without amendment by 75% of homeowners. 75%, not 3 people in a back room. I took this to Silas Mercer, an old Navy buddy turned real estate attorney, who read it for 90 seconds and grinned like a shark sensing blood in the water, telling me she had stepped into legal quicksand, but suggested we wait, let her hang herself with her own rope. And oh, did she ever, because suddenly everyone was getting violations. Mrs. Higgins for her garbage cans being 2 inches too far to the left, the Millers for grass height, Mr. Gupta for his fence. The sound of Cynthia's measuring tape became the soundtrack of our misery. But then, I found the smoking gun. I demanded the financial records, legally required to be available. And after she tried to stall, Silas sent one terrifying letter, and suddenly, I'm sitting in the office with a box of receipts, and there it was. She had approved an $18,000 security contract with Vance Secure Solutions, a company owned by her brother-in-law, funneling our neighborhood money directly into her family's pockets. The escalation was immediate and pathetic. A 19-year-old kid named Leo Vasquez, the new security guard from her brother-in-law's company, approached me on the dock looking like he was walking into a minefield, asking me to stop fishing. But when I poured him a cup of coffee and asked if he was asking or telling, he crumbled. Leo was a good kid. His dad served in Afghanistan. And over the next few mornings, he became my greatest asset, telling me that Cynthia was making him write reports claiming I was brandishing fishing equipment in a threatening manner and displaying aggressive posture. "I'm just sitting here feeding ducks, Leo," I said, pouring more coffee. "I know, sir," he sighed. "But she's crazy. She wants a paper trail." So we gave her one. Every bogus report Leo filed became evidence of harassment, proof of a vindictive campaign. And while she thought she was building a case against me, she was actually digging her own grave. Cynthia doubled down, announcing enhanced security protocols via email, expanding patrols to evening shifts just to watch me, and calling county code enforcement on me for unauthorized dock construction, which was literally just my folding chair. When the code enforcement officer, a tired man named Officer Brennan, arrived, he looked at my chair, then at Cynthia screaming about permanent fishing stations, and you could see the moment his soul left his body, realizing he was wasting taxpayer money on a suburban feud. That afternoon, I filed a formal complaint with the county for harassment and misuse of funds, triggering an automatic investigation. But my real masterstroke was requesting a formal property survey of the lake boundaries. Silas asked why, and I told him, if she wants to play property rights, let's see where the lines really are. And the survey was a revelation. The lake extended 15 feet further than anyone thought, meaning Cynthia's decorative stone wall and her precious rose garden were technically encroaching on common property. She started a smear campaign, going door to door telling neighbors I was an unstable veteran with PTSD who could snap at any moment. But I fought back with kindness, helping Mrs. Higgins with her garden, teaching the Miller girl how to tie knots, turning my morning fishing sessions into community coffee hours right in front of Cynthia's window. She watched from her kitchen, seething, isolated, while we laughed and bonded, rebuilding the community she was trying to strangle. Then came the intel that changed everything. Leo told me she was on the phone talking about property acquisition and financing. And something clicked in my brain. Why would she need financing for a lake the HOA already owned? At 2:17 a.m., unable to sleep, I was drowning in paperwork when I found it. The anomaly in the 1987 deed. The lake had a different parcel number than the common areas, and the deed stated the HOA had an easement for maintenance. But fee simple ownership was retained by the developer, Oak Creek Development Corporation. The HOA never owned the lake. They just had permission to mow the grass. I cross-referenced the tax records and my heart stopped. Oak Creek Development Corp hadn't paid property taxes since 2019, owing exactly $47,247.83, and the county was putting the lake up for tax lien auction in 6 weeks. I called Silas at dawn, waking him up to ask if he knew what a tax lien auction was, and after he stopped cursing, he confirmed that whoever paid the back taxes got the deed, free and clear. But here was the kicker. I checked the registered bidders list, and there it was, Vance Property Holdings LLC, registered to one Cynthia Vance. It all made sense, the terror campaign, the fines, driving people away from the water. She was devaluing the usage so she could buy the lake at auction for pennies on the dollar, then charge us, the residents, premium fees to access the view we thought we already owned. It was a con, a brilliant, sociopathic long con. I needed money, fast, so I liquidated my savings, got a loan against my pension, and started doing the math. But Cynthia wasn't done. She went nuclear. She found out I knew about the auction and filed for an emergency restraining order, claiming my aggressive fishing was stalking, using a paid-for psych evaluation from a doctor who had never met me. If the judge granted the order, I would be legally banned from the courthouse, unable to bid. The hearing was a circus. Cynthia sat there with fake tears, her lawyer droning on about territorial dominance, until Silas stood up and played a recording Leo had secretly taken on his phone, Cynthia's voice, crystal clear, offering Leo a bonus to lie about me threatening him with a fishing rod. The judge, a stern woman who looked like she ate lawyers for breakfast, turned a shade of purple I didn't know existed, denied the motion immediately, and referred the matter to the district attorney for criminal review. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt invincible, until Leo dropped the final bomb. Elias, she has investors. She's not just buying the lake. She's partnering with a developer to subdivide the waterfront into luxury lots. She has unlimited funding. I had my savings and a loan, maybe $130,000 total. She had millions backing her. I went home and sat by the water, looking at Elena's picture, feeling the weight of failure, until the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Higgins, holding a checkbook, followed by the Millers, Mr. Gupta, and families I barely knew, all crowded on my porch. They had heard about the scheme, about the auction, and they weren't going to let her steal our home. "This isn't just your fight anymore, Elias," Mr. Gupta said, handing me a certified check. "Cynthia made enemies of us all." By midnight, I had pledges pushing our war chest to over $180,000, not loans, but gifts, ammo for the final battle. Auction day dawned with a sky so blue it looked painted, the kind of morning Elena would have loved, crisp and full of promise. I arrived at the county courthouse steps 30 minutes early, briefcase heavy with certified funds and the hopes of 47 families, but I wasn't alone. It looked like a block party. Mrs. Higgins was there with her thermos, the Miller kids were holding Save Our Lake signs, and the local news crew, tipped off by Silas, was setting up cameras to capture the showdown. Cynthia arrived in a cloud of expensive perfume and stress, flanked by a slick guy in a $3,000 suit, her corporate backer, and when she saw the crowd, she faltered, her mask of control slipping for just a second before she sneered and marched up the steps. She thought money was the only thing that mattered. She forgot that righteous anger is a hell of a fuel source. The county clerk, a no-nonsense woman named Ms. Morrison, called the auction to order at 10 a.m. sharp. Parcel 47B, Mirror Lake property. Minimum bid $47,247.83. Cynthia's hand shot up. Minimum. I waited, letting the silence stretch, feeling the tension tighten like a fishing line before the snap. 50,000. Cynthia whipped her head around, shock flashing in her eyes. She thought the restraining order attempt had scared me off. Her partner whispered something urgent, and she barked, 60,000. 70,000. I countered instantly, my voice calm, steady, the voice of a man calling in supply drops under fire. 80. She screamed, sweat starting to ruin her perfect makeup. 90,000. At 100,000, her corporate partner stepped back, shaking his head, realizing the profit margins were dissolving. He wasn't interested in a bidding war fueled by emotion. He was business, and business just walked away. Cynthia looked at him, panicked, then at the crowd of neighbors glaring at her, and finally at me. 110,000, she shrieked, her voice cracking, betting money she didn't have. I stepped forward, looking straight into the news camera, then locked eyes with her. $150,000. The silence on those steps was absolute, heavy and suffocating. Cynthia opened her mouth, But nothing came out. She was alone, abandoned by her backers, exposed by her neighbors, and outgunned by the community she tried to exploit. Going once, the clerk intoned. Going twice. Cynthia slumped against the stone railing, defeated, looking small and pathetic. Sold to Elias Thorne for $150,000. The explosion of noise was deafening. Mrs. Higgins was sobbing into her scarf. The Miller kids were screaming. And for the first time in years, I felt a weight lift off my chest that I didn't even know I was carrying. The reporter shoved a microphone in my face, asking what I planned to do with my new private lake, and I looked at Cynthia, then at the camera. I'm transferring ownership to the community immediately, I said, loud enough for Cynthia to hear every syllable. With ironclad legal restrictions. No fees, no bans, and no board authority, ever. This water belongs to the families, not the predators. Then I turned to Cynthia, who was trying to slink away. And Cynthia, next time you try to steal a neighborhood, make sure there isn't a logistics officer living next door. 6 months later, the transformation is complete. Cynthia is gone, facing probation for the bribery charge and stripped of her real estate license. Her house sold to a young couple with twin toddlers who love the water. Leo, the security guard, is in college now studying criminal justice, funded partly by the Elena Thorne Memorial Scholarship we set up with the leftover money from the recovered HOA funds. I'm sitting on my dock this morning. The sun is coming up over Mirror Lake, painting the water in shades of gold and fire. Mrs. Higgins is over on her porch waving at me, and down the shore, I can hear the Miller girl teaching her little brother how to cast a line. The orange cones are gone, the signs are gone, and the fear is gone. We won, not just the lake, but our dignity, our home. But as I sit here, drinking coffee from the thermos Elena gave me 20 years ago, I can't help but wonder about the system that allowed a petty tyrant to almost destroy 47 lives with a clipboard and a fake smile. We fought back and won, but how many neighborhoods across the country are losing right now because they don't know their rights? So I ask you, is it right that a volunteer board can wield enough power to take your property, or is it time we rethink the entire concept of the HOA? Tell me what you'd do if they came for your backyard. I'm Elias Thorne, and the fish are biting.